found out, if you look through history, all through humankind, at one point in history, every group of people has been slaves at least one time. Even white people. And white people, they erase yours from history. But I'm here to tell you, in front of all these minorities, here's the truth, white friends. Y'all were some of the worst slaves that ever existed. Y'all was terrible white slaves.
I was reading the things that white women used to do and white men used to do to black slave men. And it's just, man, it's like, I literally could not sleep. I could not sleep. There was a story of, I believe it was either one of George Washington's wife's slaves, but she had over 40 slaves to herself. And a lot of those slaves were men. And no one fucking talks about the shit that white fucking women, white slave owners, wives used to do to black men to demoralize them. They used to make them literally leave all their clothes off and be their slaves. Like, we talk about working in the field, but we don't talk enough about that shit. And that lasts even to this motherfucking day. This is the book Black AF History, and this is about the attack on black men in America. There have been so many gender assumptions in history when it comes to like men and women. And a lot of the times we think of a lot of the black women got raped by white slave owners. Yes, but you will not understand how many black men have gotten raped, SA'd, and basically humiliated by white women that were slave owners, the wives of the slave owner, or the man, the slave owner himself, or both of them. I think everybody needs to get this book. It's here on the TikTok shop for $21. And it's going to teach you about black history that is unwhitewashed, the unwhitewashed version of it. This video might be triggering to some people, so please keep scrolling if it is. This is going to be about the abuse of black slave men. There were so many reports, you guys, that honestly, I could not read all of them. Like, there were so many reports of black men that were humiliated, abused by white women. Like, there was one report of a black man that was forced to leave all his clothes off, and he was chained to the bedroom to the point where his wife, the slave owner's wife, was like literally humiliating this man. And even the husband would too. At one point, he divorced the wife because of her attraction to the slave was more than her attraction to him. Peter Nielsen documented a lot of this abuse, and this happened a lot of times towards lighter skinned slaves and lighter skinned, mixed slaves and things of that nature. It also happened towards African slaves as well, and there was a lot of times when, like I said, this would be a humiliation thing. Like, they would either have to give in to this, they would have wives, they would have children, but at the end of the day, if they had an attraction to the slave, they would have to give in and please the woman. And a lot of times the woman would be like, in distress or whatever, and he would feel forced to do things with her. Also, a lot of times when there would be, let's say she would get pregnant with this guy, she would force his wife to be a fucking wet nurse, and she would force him to get her pregnant at the same time so that she could have the wife of the slave as a wet nurse, because she would say, oh, well, I feel like I'm too much of a slave to my children to breastfeed my own children. Therefore, I want a black woman to breastfeed my children. So we would have to breastfeed white people's kids. Like, when I tell you the evil goes so fucking deep and shit, it's just like, it's so sick and demented, y'all. It's really sick and demented. There's so many more details. But like I said, there are so many reports of this. I couldn't even read all of them. sickens me. And like I said, none of us have received reparations. I think this is insane that this has gone on, and this was America, and it's been normalized. But yeah, definitely grab this book, but be careful because there's a lot of triggering topics.
White people didn't invent slavery. In fact, they were the first to end it. Yet somehow, saying this is controversial. Watch what happens when someone says it out loud.
The reason there is no slavery in the world today, I mean, there's a lot of slavery in the world today, but in the parts of the world where there's no slavery, is because the British Empire ended it. That's why there is no slavery. That is... Well, look, the fact that you are uneducated about history doesn't mean it's funny. So let me educate you now. Let me educate you now. I know that the woke narrative and the anti-Western narrative on slavery... Well, you're not practicing free speech very well, are you? You're not practicing free speech very well, are you? The moment I say something you don't like, you're not practicing free speech very well, are you, sir?
Let's be clear. Slavery is evil, but it's an ancient human evil practiced by everyone to everyone. 4 years ago, I went to Ghana. I stood in a slave dungeon where people who looked like me sold people who looked like me to white people. But long before Europeans began the transatlantic slave trade, there was a trans-Saharan slave trade. For over 1,000 years, brown Arab slavers sold millions of black Africans across the Sahara. Then came the Barbary slave trade. In North Africa, Arab and African raiders captured and sold over 1 million white Christian Europeans. China, Korea, Japan, India, every one of them practiced slavery. Europeans did take slavery to another scale when they came to Africa. But it's not because they were more evil. It's because they had the technology to commit evil on an industrial scale. So, which major power stopped slavery first? The British, in large part because of pro-human Christian values. The same values America was founded on. The same values that drove white Americans to fight other white Americans to free black Americans in the Civil War. Values missing in places like Libya, where today you can buy a human being for $400. White people aren't better than anyone else, but they're also not worse. Yet, some black people are taught to hate white people, and many white people are taught to hate themselves. We keep pretending evil has a color, as if less melanin means less morality. That lie makes us ignore history and fuels racial hatred. Right now, much of that hatred is aimed at white people. But why should black or brown people care? Because hatred is a hot coal that we hold in our hand, waiting to throw at another. It burns them, but it burns us too. It turns every problem into white supremacy while defending black degeneracy. And when the pendulum swings back, white people react with hostility, and then they defend white degeneracy. The only way out of this is to stop making morality about the color of people. Because in our capacity for good and evil, we are all equals.
What still baffles me until today is how in the world did these people allowed to practice this kind of inhuman nature? What people, black people, had to endure, all this enslaved group of people, what they had to endure was so massive. And you understand why I mean, it now makes sense when somebody says that some of these people didn't have a soul. Because honestly, if you had a soul, this is something that you cannot do to people. You cannot do this to people. But it still baffles my mind how you felt like you're so much important as compared to the person that you're enslaving. Really, really baffles my mind until today. And how did they legalize this just to begin with? Because everything that these people ever do was to dehumanize people. They didn't even care the post-traumatic syndrome that this came with, and how this is really even affecting black people until today, like right now I'm talking to you. Some people are still nursing wounds of their ancestors. Some people are poor because of all these issues. And then somebody will come and say that You are poor because you have accepted to be poor. It's not about slavery. When you try to understand the relationship between slavery and capitalism and how all this came to place and how you get to understand, because everything that you're seeing happening today was built by a black person. What if I told you that if black people had to build this for themselves, can you imagine the amount of wealth that black people would have been having today? The question of reparations. Black people are not saying that you give reparations because their ancestors worked. Not really. They are saying that you give reparations because they are the ones that built the economy. Even during the Jim Crow times, all those things that they went through, that's why they are demanding for reparation. They're not asking for more. They can forgive, yes, but only if you understand the magnitude, the nature of inhuman that you have. And this have made people question a lot of things that are happening around them. This including religion, right? But this is just a point that I don't want to get into because it gets so political when now we start talking about religion. But at the end of the day, Christianity played a part in this, and we need to understand that fact, right? When we decide to tell the truth, we don't say half truths, we say all of the truth. Another thing, there's this argument that, you Africans, you also sold other Africans. Honestly, I'm not trying to defend black people like Africans who were back there, like those kings who did all they did. But you need to understand that white people brought about the concept of capitalism in Africa. What did they do? They started luring all these kings with all these things. And since it is greed, which is in human nature, they fell for it. And now they started conducting all this, what is called pioneering. Pioneering is called selling of debtors. They started selling all these people to all this work, to work on the farms of white people. And some to be exported to work on the farms, in the plantations in Brazil and all these places. So you understand how this came into play. I'm not trying to, defend some of our ancestors, Africans, what we did, because I understand we participated in slavery. But look, who really caused all these problems? The same person that said that he ended slavery is the same person that caused the problem. You cannot cause a problem and end it and then you become a hero. So let's watch the video. I'll be back and then we'll be sharing our thoughts in regards to this. As you know, I'm your host and presenter, GDoc Stories. And for those watching me for the first time, welcome to the channel. Here's where we have this pragmatic discussion that really helps us make the right decisions when we talk about these issues. And if you wish to buy me a coffee, you wish you want to support me, you wish you want to support the channel by buying a coffee, man, I'll really appreciate. But until then, let's watch the video. I'll be back and then I'll be sharing my thoughts at the end of it all. You know how we do it, right? So let's jump into it. I'll be back.
I am trying to get real with myself and with other white people, and it is painful work. There's a whole lot of blame toward black people for being the cause of how white people treat them, and I'm trying to get to the bottom of that. I decided to take a closer look at slavery, since that's such a big topic in the United States. There has been slavery all over the world forever, and all colors of people have enslaved other colors of people for as long as we know about. But the transatlantic slave trade, in which Europeans brought African and Caribbean black people to the United States to be free labor in the new colonies before they were really the United States, is a whole different story of slavery. Slavery historically had to do with who won and who lost a war, who was convenient, who stumbled by at the wrong time, and so it wasn't specifically race-based. So why did these white Europeans choose black people to enslave? Because their physical differences from whites made it easier to create lies that they were biologically inferior. They invented science to defend this. It was easier to make these people who looked so different from us less human. And that lie made it easier to justify torture, rape, family separation, and death on a massive scale, and it made them, quite frankly, easier to identify if they tried to escape. The legacy didn't disappear when slavery ended. Eugenics came along and fed the racial superiority notion of whiteness, and it influenced the Nazi narrative along with the racial one. It carried over into segregation, Jim Crow, housing, policing, incarceration, education, all of that. If we're ever going to fix what's broken, we need to get curious enough to name how it got broken in the first place. White people need to get curious so we can say no more, not on my watch.
I work hard, he work hard.
I worked hard. I get up at 4 o'clock and get my breakfast done. Just at dawn of day, I go to the field and we pick cotton.
Mr. and Mrs. Haywood Jenkins of Sharkey County, Mississippi, have, between them, picked cotton for over a century.
My boss man came along. He says, Mary Jane? I said, sir. Says, I say, when you wash? I said, I washed last night. He said, I don't want you to do that no more. That's my agent, you know. He says, every Friday morning or Friday evening, you wash. And let all the children stay there with you until you get through. When you get through, then y'all can go back to the field and wait. Now, the agents was mean, some of them. Some of them was mean. They want to hook the colored people. And that time, the white man come along. He says, hey, but you ain't in the field yet? He just had started plowing. He said, yes, I just not had to eat my dinner. God damn it, you ain't doing a goddamn thing. Says, God damn it, I ought to take this damn stick and frail the hell out you. He said, no, he said, if you frail the hell out of me, goddamn, I frail the hell out of you. It'd make me feel bad if I was under them, you know, how mean they was to treat us like that.
You have no idea how horrific slavery was. They ate Nat Turner after his execution, boiling his body for oil and turning his remains into souvenirs. Enslaved Africans' hair was used to stuff furniture, including pillows and mattresses, while their teeth were sold as dentures for white wealthy people, including but not limited to George Washington. The skin of the enslaved individual was flayed and turned into leather for shoes and clothing. Pregnant black women were whipped on their stomachs to induce miscarriages or forced to give birth under inhumane conditions, only to have their infants sold off. Enslaved men and women were subject to brutal medical procedures without anesthesia or consent. Tools like thumb screws and iron muzzles were used to silence them, while branding irons seared their skin with the marks of their enslavers. Rape was weaponized as a tool of control, with enslaved women forced to bear children who were automatically enslaved, perpetuating the cycle. Families were torn apart at auction blocks, with children as young as toddlers sold to distant plantations, never to see their parents again. Even after death, the bodies of enslaved people were desecrated. Their remains were often stolen from graveyards and used for medical dissections or experimentation. Their lives were treated as commodities, and their suffering was systematic, deliberate, and utterly inhumane. Slavery wasn't just a labor system. It was a calculated mechanism of dehumanization, leaving a legacy of cruelty and trauma that reverberates through history to this day. And still, there is no recompense or reparations for the descendants of the enslaved. And the algorithm will probably make it so that most people don't see this video. I wonder why.
Because it was the white man, when they arrived here in the Americas, that slaughtered over 13 million natives. It was the white man that raped their women and daughters. It was the white man that destroyed their culture. It was the white man that took their language. It was the white man that devastated the beauty of what was here prior. And standing on the words of Archbishop Desmond Tutu, when the missionaries came to Africa, they had the Bible and we had the land. They said, let us pray. We closed our eyes, and when we opened them, we had the Bible and the white man had the land. See, it was the white man that went over to Africa and slaughtered millions. enslaved millions, destroyed their culture, their language, and the beauty that was there prior to us. Because see, I recall it was the white man who enslaved our black brothers and sisters once they took them from Africa here to the Americas. And for over 400 years, it's been the white man that has continued to enslave our black brothers and sisters. In fact, when they were prospering like Black Wall Street, it was the invasion of the white man that destroyed that city. It was the invasion of the white man onto the island of Puerto Rico that devastated the people that lived there. It was the white man that stepped foot into the islands and the nations of Haiti that once again devastated and left it to die. Because the reality is this: everywhere the white man has invaded, everywhere the white man has placed his foot, he has left it destroyed.
When studying American history, one of the most important questions to answer is, how did Americans justify slavery? How did they convince themselves that they had the right to own black people as property? What we find is that they had numerous ways to justify slavery, including philosophy, religion, science, and straight-up lies and self-deception. One prominent way that slave owners justified slavery was by turning to the ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle, who is without a doubt one of the most famous philosophers in human history. American education in the 18th and 19th centuries had a heavy focus on ancient Greece and Rome, and Aristotle's philosophy was studied by many Americans, including the founding fathers. Even though Aristotle was extremely intelligent and a very influential thinker, he left the world a dark legacy when it came to his views on slavery. Aristotle believed that slavery was normal and natural, and that some men were born to be masters and others were born to be slaves. He argued that humanity is divided into two, the masters and the slaves, or those who have the right to command and those who are born to obey. Therefore, to justify slavery, all American slave owners had to do was point to Aristotle. They argued that white men were the natural-born masters and black people were the natural-born slaves. However, an even greater justification for slavery than Aristotle was Christianity. Slave owners frequently justified the right to own black people as property by citing the Bible and arguing that slavery was sanctioned by God. As Samuel F.B. Morse put it, slavery per se is not a sin. It is a social construction ordained from the beginning of the world for the wisest purposes, benevolent and disciplinary, by divine wisdom. There are plenty of passages from both the Old and New Testament that condone slavery. For example, Exodus provides detailed rules about owning slaves and tells slave owners that the slave is their property. In the New Testament, Paul says, "Slaves, obey your earthly masters in everything, and do it not only when their eye is on you and to gain their favor, but with sincerity of heart and reverence for the Lord." Slave owners would often read the Bible out loud to their slaves to show them that God approved of their enslavement. For example, when Solomon Northrop was enslaved in Louisiana, his master would preach pro-slavery sermons on Sundays. His favorite part of the Bible was Luke chapter 12, verse 47, which states, "The servant who knows the master's will and does not get ready, or does not do what the master wants, will be beaten with many blows." Solomon Northrop described how after reading this line, his master would explain, "That inward that don't take care, that don't obey his Lord, that's his master. That there inward shall be beaten with many stripes." Now many signifies a great many. 40, 100, 150, that's scripture. One of the most popular ways that slave owners used the Bible to justify slavery was through the curse of Ham. Most of you are probably familiar with the story of Noah. In Genesis, we learn that God told Noah he was going to destroy the world in a great flood, and he instructed Noah to build an ark and fill it with 2 of every animal so he could repopulate the world after the flood was over. In the story, Noah obeyed God, and after the flood, he became a drunk. I mean, you can't really blame him. He did just watch God annihilate nearly every living being on earth. In Genesis, we hear of a strange story that involves one of Noah's drinking binges. One day, Noah gets drunk and passes out naked. His son Ham sees him and tells his 2 brothers, who cover up their father with a blanket. When Noah wakes up and realizes that his son saw him naked and dishonored him, he curses Ham's son Canaan and says, "Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants shall he be." Some Americans interpreted this passage from the Bible to mean that all of Ham's descendants were forever doomed to be slaves, and they argued that black skin was the mark of the curse of Ham. Therefore, when Americans sought to justify slavery, all they had to do was say it wasn't their fault. It was Noah who cursed them to be slaves, and since this came from the Bible, it was seen as the word of God. This story might seem ridiculous, but many slave owners used this argument to rationalize their right to own black people. It didn't matter that this story was irrational and absurd. The point is that they were able to use Christianity as an excuse to abuse and exploit black people. Slave owners also justified slavery through the scientific theories of the time, which were heavily influenced by racism and white supremacy. For example, the French scientist Georges Cuvier argued that there were three distinct races of human beings: the white Caucasian, the yellow Mongolian, and the black Ethiopian. He said the Caucasian is distinguished by the beauty of the oval formed by his head and the color of his hair. To this variety, the most highly civilized nations, and those which have generally held all others in subjection, are indebted for their origin. On the other hand, he argued, the Negro has always remained in the most complete state of utter barbarism. For scientists like this, the fact that white people enslaved black people was simply a law of nature. For men like this, slavery was the natural state of the black race. Others, like the French naturalist Georges Louis Buffon, believed that whites were helping black people by enslaving them. He believed that if black people were introduced to the cooler climate of the Americas, their skin would naturally turn white. He argued that in Europe, we behold the human form in its greatest perfection, and this is where we ought to form our ideas of the real and natural color of man. He said that if black people lived long enough in a cold climate, then their skin would become as white as the natives of Europe. Therefore, he believed that slavery was good for black people because it would eventually turn them white, which was the natural and perfect state of humanity. Never mind that human beings originated in Africa. Even abolitionists who opposed slavery still held racist ideas about black people. For example, the Philadelphia doctor Benjamin Rush believed that black skin was a disease that could be cured, and through the right treatment, black people could eventually become white. Another way that Americans justified slavery is arguing that by enslaving black people, they were doing them a favor. They argued that slavery was a moral good and benefited the slave. The man most responsible for this theory was George Fitzhugh from Virginia. In 1854, he published a book called Sociology for the South, where he argued that black people were inferior to whites and had to be slaves for their own good. Fitzhugh disagreed with the Declaration of Independence that all men are created equal. Instead, he argued, men are not born physically, morally, or intellectually equal. It would be far nearer to the truth to say that some were born with saddles on their backs and others booted and spurred to ride them, and the riding does them good. For Fitzhugh, black people were born to be slaves. He argued, the Negro is but a grown child and must be governed as a child. The master occupies toward him the place of parent or guardian. Fitzhugh believed that a free black person was an oxymoron and said he would become an insufferable burden to society. Society has the right to prevent this and can only do so by subjecting him to domestic slavery. Fitzhugh argued that the Negro race is inferior to the white race, and if black people were ever to live in freedom next to whites, then gradual but certain extermination would be their fate. Therefore, Fitzhugh believed that by enslaving black people, whites were helping them. He said that slavery Christianizes, protects, supports, and civilizes him. He told his readers that the Negro slaves of the South are the happiest and in some sense the freest people in the world. Clearly, Americans had no deficit of justifications for why they had the right to own black people as slaves. However, all of these justifications were meant to do one thing: hide the fact that the real reason why white people enslaved black people is because of greed, profit, and power. Slavery was an economic system that produced extreme wealth, and white supremacy was the ideological justification that upheld it. The reason why white people came up with so many justifications for slavery is because in their heart they knew that it was wrong. They knew that they had no right to exploit and brutalize black people, so they constantly had to reassure themselves and ease their conscience. They had to constantly defend and justify a system that was clearly evil. They had to find some way to sleep at night.
Jerome, how old are you?
9.
9. Do you go to school?
Yes.
Where do you go to school, Jerome?
At the Overtureville Elementary School.
I see. What is your sister's name?
Lois.
That's Lois. And what are your other sisters' names?
Catherine. And Beulah.
Catherine and Beulah. What happened to your foot, Jerome?
Dig a nail in out there by the wash house.
So you drove a nail in out by the wash house. What did your mother do for that?
She put some alcohol on it.
Where do you sleep, Jerome?
In this bed.
You have this big bed?
Yes.
What happened? How did you get that hole in that bed there, Jerome?
The rats.
The what?
Rats.
Now, Jerome, you are taking care of Kathy, of Beulah, and Lois.
Yes.
Now, are you going to give them lunch today?
Yes.
What are you going to feed them?
I don't know, sir.
Do you have any food here to give them?
Yes.
I see. What time does your mother come home?
I don't know, sir.
The following day, Arlene King, the mother of Jerome, Kathy, Lois, and Beulah, again was picking beans.
Aileen King, I saw your children yesterday at the Okeechobee camp. Why didn't you put them in the nursery?
I don't make enough to pay for it.
How much does it cost to put them in?
85 cents.
85 cents.
That's right.
Aileen, what time did you come out the field this morning?
6 o'clock.
What time would you get home?
About 3:30, 4 o'clock.
6 this morning to 4 o'clock this afternoon.
That's right.
How much did you earn?
$1.
$1?
That's right. $1.
Is that because the beans were of poor quality?
That's right.
Has this happened before?
That's right.
How much will your food cost you today?
About $2.
Aileen, how old are you?
29.
How many children do you have?
14.
How old were you when you first started working in the fields?
8.
You've been working 21 years in the fields?
That's right.
Aileen, do you...
Our digital PDF, Black History Facts You Probably Didn't Learn in School, is full of black stories and facts that aren't usually taught in school. The PDF includes information that is often overlooked in traditional education and history books. The digital PDF can be downloaded and read at your convenience. You don't want to miss out on the chance to uncover the untold black history facts and stories. Click the link in our bio to support BHU.
But white culture is formed in savagery. I also said there isn't a place on God's green earth that they haven't come there and decimated the native inhabitants. There isn't a place. They are murderous savages. That's their culture. They call it conquest. We call it savagery. This is broad history. This is the history of white cultures. When they have the intention to invent a weapon, they don't just invent a weapon that can harm an enemy in one-to-one combat. No. They invent bombs that can decimate entire populations. They invent viruses like smallpox that they spread amongst unvaccinated Native Americans and then decimate their populations. And therefore the Americans, have got a native population which is less than the settler population in certain countries like Argentina. I mean, even a country like Brazil, yes, obviously there are still some native inhabitants there, but their population is less than those who were brought in from Africa as slaves, as well as those who came in as European settlers in the colonial times. So the culture of white people throughout white history, even to this very date, is that of savagery. It's that of inhumane behavior that is normalized to the point where they feel like they're entitled to behave like that.
You must never forget that the Roman Catholic Church was involved in slavery, and they have apologized for it. We must never forget that the Church of England was involved in slavery, and they have apologized for it using the Bible. Theology.
Hello, folks. How you feel? Good this morning? Hope you do. I'm trying to get on my feet again. Feel pretty good. Thankful it's as well as it is. Oh, boys, I'm pleased to see you. I don't know where you come from, but I give you all the welcome I've got to offer you. And I want to tell you that I'm living on the same ground that I've lived on for 75 long years when I come here as an 18-year-old bride. I went to Washington 50 years and a little more ago. I saw all the people around there and been with the presidents. And I learned a great many things up there that I didn't know before. I'll add a little more to it. I was one of the board of lady managers for the Chicago Exposition. And I served my full time in Chicago and learned a good many things over there. I was a delegate to the Tennessee Centennial Exposition. I was a delegate to St. Louis, a juror at St. Louis. I think for a North Georgia cracker of my size and age, I've had a pretty good education on that line. That do all right? I was a 3-year-old girl when the Indians were moved from this country to Indian Territory. I have an indistinct recollection of seeing the red men as they went through the woods, for everything was woods nearly at that time. I have a distinct impression, if a 3-year-old child can have it. Nevertheless, I've been here since that time, and I've seen the march of progress all the way. At that time, we had only stagecoaches, and we only had horses and buggies, and we had lots of footback travelers.
So, brothers and sisters, we cannot repay wrong with wrong. So much things have happened. At least it's about time we all take accountability. One thing that this group of people don't want to do is to take accountability. Understanding the fact that there is so much lingering traumas that are still happening until today. Still that they have not learned from the atrocities that their ancestors did. They have not still yet learned. Because you see how sometimes they treat black people in these spaces. It makes sense that this group of people still haven't learned from the mistakes that their ancestors did. And how do they do this? They deflect from all this by saying, oh, that slavery and racism ended a long time ago. Those things doesn't exist. Any black person that brings a discussion of racism or slavery, they're just trying a way of, hiding their life failures because they'll find something to blame on. That's how they think and that's how they talk. And since you're a black person who really doesn't really understand the magnitude of all these things, you find yourself falling in this problem without you understanding that some of this problem, including the meritocratic lie that is happening today in the United States, is because same damn people, the pace that Africans were having, the pace that black people were having, early civilization that began back in Africa, Egypt to be specific. People learned how to write. People had their own, monetary system. That's barter trade. We had our own ways of solving problems. We had our own ways of praying to our God. We have our own ways of interacting with each other before you bought all these problems that are happening. And when I try to compare those living periods, I'm going to be talking about this group of white people. I'm talking about Vikings, right? Look at the lives that Vikings led. These people manslaughtered each other. These people were dirty. These people didn't know anything which was right because they were raping women. They were doing all these things. And the same damn things, they came back and did it to African women. They did it to black women. And so you are understanding the magnitude of all these things because they'll try to deflect by saying, oh, you black people, you also participated in slavery. While it's true and it's important to take accountability, we did. But look at the main cause of the problem. You found these people living peacefully. You injected the virus. And this virus, you started introducing them to these funny commodities. These people didn't understand what these real things were, but somehow, somewhere, you managed to convince them to start praising and having these things and lie to them that you came from the sun and that you are so close to God. And these people believed in you because we were so much innocent. These people were so much innocent, right? And when now you injected this virus and now black people started selling each other, you're right now coming back and saying that, you people sold each other. Now let's talk about history then. You also sold your own. Did you know that part of history? Yes, you did sell. You did sell one of your own. The same problems that you did to your own, but we can't compare the slavery that was within the white community and the slavery that was within the black community. This one, you did it with impunity because there were no person. Slavery was legal. You could sell anybody like a commodity. You could buy like a commodity. You could exchange a person with a product like a commodity. And this all was allowed. People are not getting to understand the extent of slavery and how it's really even affecting people today. Some of black people, their lands were grabbed, taken, so that these white people can set up their military bases. You think issues of military bases started today? No, it didn't start today, brothers and sisters. It began long time ago. For you to understand the magnitude of slavery, you need to visit the old history, see how black people were treated. All those devastating pictures, black people being hanged. Right. Look at the sundown towns, real sundown towns back in the days when slavery was still slavery. Look at what they did to black people in those cities of the United States. And you come and tell me right on my face that you are complaining about nothing. Oh, those things happened a long time ago. You don't understand the magnitude. You don't understand the devastation that this comes from. You don't understand the PTSD that black people are going through. Right. And so it's important to be humble and to understand that, okay, this thing happened to your ancestors. How can we help you heal? Because there is illness that is required. When you get to learn the works of, I've forgotten his name. Please remind me of the person that has written Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome. I don't know if it's Carol Anderson's. I've forgotten this person that wrote that. But you get to understand that the PTSD that was associated with slavery was passed down to all these generations. And somehow you call black people angry. You call black people aggressive. You don't understand that these people are still nurturing the wounds that their ancestors left them with. And you are the ones who caused all these wounds. And this needs to be addressed. And everyone needs to know this because it's an important part of history. And that's why they don't want you to learn. They don't want you to get to understand all these things. And because these things happened. So please, brothers and sisters, let me know what you think about this video. I might have said a lot. In case I said something that wasn't good with you, I apologize. But if you feel I said something that belt you, if you feel I said something that concur with you, please let me know in the comment section. And I'm also open. Let me know. I'm open to learn. Let me know what you feel about all these issues. I'm your host and presenter, Agent of Stories. But until then, let me see you in my next video. Peace, love, and harmony. Salute.